They threw Mom a birthday party. I wasn't invited. Not a text, not a call. I only found out because someone posted a picture online. Everyone laughing under soft golden lights in the house I helped pay to renovate. I looked closely at every face. There was Dad, Mom, my younger brother Kyle, his wife Melissa, and all the nieces and nephews. A 3-tier cake, balloons floating lazily in the background, and a big gold banner that said, "Happy 75th, Mom." I wasn't in it. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake. Maybe they forgot. But then I remembered. Last week, I called Mom, just to check in. She kept it short, said she had company, hung up before I could ask anything else. I'm the oldest, the firstborn. For over 40 years, I've tried to keep the peace. Always showed up when they needed help. Always played it cool when someone else got the credit. But I guess when you spend your life shrinking yourself down, one day they stop seeing you altogether. My father used to say, "You're the responsible one, Rachel." But that didn't stop him from signing over the deed to the house. The very house I poured my savings into. To Kyle. He didn't even tell me. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I told myself, fine, I'll make my own space. I didn't want much, just somewhere quiet. Somewhere that belonged only to me. But silence, that kind of long, constant silence, starts to sound a lot like permission to other people. That party? That wasn't about a cake or balloons. That was a message. They thought I wouldn't show. I remembered being 25, working 2 jobs to help my parents pay off the mortgage. Every month, I'd collect my paychecks and hand them over. Never asked for anything back. Kyle, on the other hand, new cars, designer watches, and somehow, always the golden child. I used to blame myself. Thought maybe I wasn't warm enough, not easy to talk to. But then I realized, it's not that I don't speak. It's that they never really cared to listen. That night, I sat alone in my 1-bedroom apartment, scrolling through old texts. One from Mom to Kyle read, "Don't tell your sister. She'll just cause a scene." Right underneath was a photo of the cake with the caption, "Just family, just family." What did that make me? It hits you hard. That moment when you realize you're no longer useful to the people you love. That maybe you never really mattered to them unless you were solving something for them. I stared at the ceiling for hours. Then I turned on my laptop and logged into an old investment account I hadn't touched in nearly 10 years. Back when I worked corporate finance, I used to squirrel away money month by month, like planting seeds in the dark. I forgot how much had grown. The number startled me, not because it made me rich, but because it made me free. I sent an email to a dealership that night. I didn't want a flashy car to flaunt. I wanted a car that shut people up the second you stepped out of it. I didn't want to say a word. I wanted them to realize, on their own, that they had written off the wrong person. 3 days later, I pulled up to that house in a white Lamborghini, dressed in a sleek black dress. Not flashy, just sharp. Sharp enough to cut through every smug assumption they ever made about me. The party was still going. Lights glowing, music humming from inside. I walked up the path, heels echoing against the brick. The moment I opened the door, everything stopped. Mom froze, mid-sentence. Kyle stood, holding a knife over the cake, hands stiff. People turned to look. Their eyes didn't say, "Oh, look who's here." Their eyes said, "What is she doing here?" I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just walked, slow, steady, into the room, taking in every single face. No one said a word. No one dared ask why I was there, because deep down, they already knew. I set a small box on the table, wrapped neatly, turned, and walked to the door, But just as I reached it, I paused. I turned back, my voice calm, measured. "Happy birthday, Mom. I hope you live long enough to finally see who really stood by you." And then I left. No one called after me. No one chased me down the steps. But I heard the murmurs, the kind I'd always been excluded from. Only this time, I wasn't shut out. This time, I walked away by choice. Not as the overlooked daughter. Not as the doormat. I slid into the driver's seat, turned the key. The engine purred, headlights spilling across the same front porch where I once stood, begging for them to see me. Now I saw everything, and I didn't have to beg anymore. I didn't go home right away. I drove for hours that night. No destination, just the open road and the hum of the engine keeping me company. It was strange, freeing even. I hadn't felt like that in years, not since before all the compromises, before I became the one everyone could lean on. But no one thought to ask if I was okay. I ended up at a quiet overlook just outside the city. The skyline blinked in the distance, like a world I once thought I could belong to. I sat there in the car for a long while, my hands resting on the steering wheel, heart still heavy, but steady. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about reclaiming something I didn't even realize I'd lost. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. 23 missed calls, 14 texts, 1 voicemail. None from Mom. Most of them were from Kyle, vague and tense. "Where did you get that car? What was that supposed to mean? Are you trying to humiliate us?" I didn't respond, because the truth was, I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. I was just done hiding. The silence from Mom hurt more than any of Kyle's passive-aggressive messages. She didn't even bother pretending. Not a word of surprise, not a question, just a void, like I had never existed in the first place. But I had existed. For decades, I had bent over backward to keep this family stitched together. I was the one who remembered birthdays, who drove Dad to the hospital when his back gave out, who sent money when Kyle's business failed, even though he never paid me back. And yet, somehow, I'd become the outsider. That weekend, I went through old boxes in my closet, cards, photos, notes, bits and pieces of a life I'd lived in the margins of other people's priorities. One photo stuck out. Thanksgiving, maybe 10 years ago. I was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, basting a turkey, while everyone else laughed in the living room. I remember that moment. I was exhausted. No one offered to help, and no one even remembered I cooked that meal. I put the photo aside and stood up straighter. That version of me, the one who gave everything without asking for anything, she was gone. The following week, Kyle showed up at my apartment. I watched him from the window as he stood outside, shifting from foot to foot. He looked nervous. I didn't rush to open the door. When I finally did, he gave me this half smile, like we were kids again. "Hey, Rach." I didn't say anything, just waited. He sighed. "Look, about the party. It wasn't personal." That phrase, "it wasn't personal," it always shows up when someone's trying to excuse something cruel. "You invited everyone but me," I said. "Mom's 75. You think that's not personal?" He looked down, picking at the edge of his sleeve. "We just figured you wouldn't want to come. You're always so busy." Busy. That's what they'd decided. That my silence was detachment. That because I stopped chasing after their approval, I didn't care anymore. I let the quiet stretch between us. He couldn't even look me in the eye. "I used to think," I said slowly, "that family meant giving without keeping score. But it turns out the only ones keeping score were you." Kyle didn't argue, just stood there, shifting. Then he asked the question I knew was coming. "That car, where'd you get the money?" I stared at him for a long second. And then, With the calmest voice I could manage, I said, "From the part of my life you all never bothered to ask about?" He looked confused, like he genuinely couldn't understand how I'd done something without his knowledge. It hit me then. They had boxed me in so tightly for so long, they couldn't imagine me stepping outside it. He left after that. No apology, no real acknowledgement. Just a murmured, "See you around," and the sound of his footsteps disappearing down the stairs. I closed the door and locked it behind him. Not out of spite, but because I finally understood. I didn't owe them any more open doors. That night I started a list, not of what they owed me. I'd stopped expecting that a long time ago. It was a list of all the things I'd done for myself, the decisions I'd made that were mine alone, the things that made me proud when no one else was watching. I wrote down the year I earned my CPA while working 2 jobs, the night I fixed my own plumbing with a wrench in a YouTube video, the solo trip I took to Portland just to sit by the ocean and remember what silence felt like when it wasn't loneliness. By the end of the list, I felt something strange in my chest. Not joy, exactly, but something close. Clarity, maybe. I folded the paper and tucked it into my wallet, not because I needed a reminder, but because the next time someone tried to tell me who I was, I'd already know. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. No more calls, no more texts. It was as if they'd all come to an unspoken agreement. Pretend it never happened. Sweep it under the rug, like they'd done with every uncomfortable truth in our family. And honestly, that suited me fine. But silence can reveal things louder than words ever could. One afternoon, I stopped by the grocery store near Mom's place. Not on purpose. It was just convenient. As I reached for a carton of eggs, I heard someone whisper behind me, "That's her, Rachel, the one with the Lamborghini." I turned my head just slightly, catching 2 older women, neighbors, I think, watching me with open curiosity. They weren't judging. They were just surprised, like they were trying to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the one standing in front of them. It wasn't the car they couldn't believe. It was that I'd finally broken character. I paid for my groceries and walked out without looking back. That evening, I received a message from Melissa, Kyle's wife. Short, polite, strange. "Hey, Rachel. I know things are tense right now, but I was wondering if you might have time for coffee sometime this week. Just you and me." I stared at the screen for a long time. Melissa and I had never been particularly close. She always kept her distance, always sided with Kyle, always smiled that overly sweet smile whenever I was around, like she was trying too hard to pretend nothing was wrong. I replied with a single word. "Sure." We met at a cafe downtown, neutral ground. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting by the window, a coffee in front of her, untouched. She smiled when she saw me, that same careful, practiced smile. "Thanks for coming," she said, a little too brightly. I sat down across from her. "What's this about, Melissa?" She looked down into her cup, stirring it even though there was no cream or sugar in it. I wanted to say I'm sorry about the party. You should have been there." I didn't say anything. I wanted to hear where this was going. She continued, voice lower now. "Kyle and your mom. They didn't want drama. They thought if they left you out, it would be easier." "Easier for who?" I asked. She winced. "Them, I guess. Of course." I leaned back, folded my arms. "You knew it was wrong, and you went along with it." Melissa's face flushed. "I did. I'm not proud of it, but I've seen how they treat you. Honestly, I don't know how you've put up with it all these years." Her voice cracked on that last part, and I realized something. She wasn't here for them. She was here because something in her had started to shift too. "They talk about you like you're the difficult one," she said, barely above a whisper. "But you're the only one in that family who doesn't pretend." That caught me off guard. "I'm sorry," she said again. "I just wanted you to know that. From me." I nodded slowly. "Thank you." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is from your mom. She asked me to give it to you." I didn't reach for it right away. Something about it felt calculated. "What does it say?" I asked. Melissa shrugged. I didn't read it. I took it anyway, slipped it into my bag without opening it. When we left the cafe, she hesitated. Then she said, "Rachel, whatever happens, I hope you don't shut the door completely. Not for all of us." I didn't answer, because the truth was, I wasn't sure what that door even led to anymore. Back home, I sat on my couch, holding the folded letter in my hands. I stared at it for a long time, debating whether I even cared enough to read it. Eventually, I unfolded it. It was short, in Mom's neat, old-fashioned handwriting. "Rachel, I don't know what you want from me anymore. I never meant to hurt you. I just didn't think you'd care about the party. You've always been so distant. You always seemed like you were fine on your own. Maybe I was wrong. Mom, no apology, no ownership, just the same tired story. You're the strong one. You don't need us. So we gave you nothing." I folded the letter again, slid it back into its envelope, and then, without thinking too much, I opened the drawer next to the couch and dropped it inside with the others. Because yes, there were others. Letters, notes, messages, all of them coded in the same kind of emotional sleight of hand, pretending to reach out while really just shifting the blame. But this time, I didn't feel the sting. Not like before. This time, I saw it clearly. She didn't write to reconnect. She wrote to unburden herself. And I wasn't interested in being someone's guilt sponge anymore. I made a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the city lights flicker on, one by one. Outside, the world kept turning, but inside, something had finally stopped. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I used to hate mornings. They always felt like the beginning of another day I had to endure. But lately, there was something comforting about being awake before the rest of the world, before the phone started buzzing, before anyone expected anything of me. I took my coffee out to the balcony and wrapped myself in an old sweater. The air was cool, still, the kind of stillness that lets you hear your own heartbeat again. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was waiting for a message, for an apology, for someone to finally understand. I was just there, and it was enough. Later that afternoon, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in over a decade, Noah. We worked together years ago, when I was fresh out of college and still convinced I could fix everything and everyone if I just tried hard enough. He recognized me first. "Rachel," he said, his voice a mix of surprise and warmth. "Is that you?" I turned around slowly, not sure if I wanted to be recognized. But when I saw him, something softened. He hadn't changed much. Still wore those square glasses, still had that calm, steady way of speaking. We talked for a few minutes, the usual catching up. He mentioned he'd moved back into town a few years ago. He was running his own small firm now. Divorced, no kids. "Just me and a lazy Labrador named Jerry," he said, laughing. I told him I wasn't married either, that I'd been working freelance, doing financial audits and consulting, that I liked the quiet, the control. He looked at me, eyes kind. "You always were the one who kept everything together. Even back then." I don't know why that hit me the way it did. Maybe because he said it like it was a strength, not a burden, not a flaw. We exchanged numbers, said we'd grab coffee sometime. I walked away, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Seen. Not judged. Not labeled. Just seen. That night, I opened my journal and wrote one line at the top of the page. You don't have to prove anything to people who refuse to see you. I underlined it. Twice. The next few days passed quietly. I focused on work, cleaned out old drawers, let go of more than just clutter. I tossed out cards with empty signatures, trinkets from birthdays that felt like obligations more than celebrations, gifts I'd kept just to avoid questions. There's a certain peace in choosing what to keep and what to release. But peace never lasts long in families like mine. It started with a voicemail from my cousin Rebecca. Hey, Rachel, just wanted to give you a heads up. There's talk about putting Mom in a care facility. Everyone's saying you should help out financially since, you're doing so well. I played that message twice, then a third time, just to let the absurdity sink in. So that's what this was. They'd seen the car, heard the whispers, decided I was wealthy now. And suddenly, I was family again. Not because they missed me, not because they wanted me back, but because I was useful. Again, I didn't call back. 2 days later, Kyle texted, Hey, Mom's really stressed about Aunt Linda. Can you pitch in for the nursing home fees? Even just a little? No apology, no acknowledgement, no mention of the party, just a hand reaching out, palm up. I sat there, staring at that message, and something inside me finally cracked. Not in the way it used to, not from pain, from clarity. They hadn't changed, and they weren't going to. They didn't suddenly realize I was worthy. They just finally realized I had value. And those are not the same thing. I typed my reply slowly, deliberately. I hope she's okay, but I'm no longer the family's emergency fund. Please don't contact me for money again. I hit send, blocked the number. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt clean, like closing a window before the rain. Later that night, I poured myself a glass of wine and watched the city from my window again. The same lights, the same distant cars humming below, but everything felt different because now I knew the truth. They weren't going to change, but I had. A week passed. No one called. No one knocked on my door. The silence wasn't cold anymore. It was spacious, like a room that finally belonged to me after years of being rented out to other people's needs. And then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. Handwritten envelope. Familiar script. I didn't need to open it to know it was from Mom. I sat with it in my lap for a long time. The paper was thick, like the kind you use when you want something to feel important. But weight doesn't equal sincerity. Eventually, I opened it. Rachel, I'm sorry you feel like we excluded you. That wasn't our intention. Kyle thought you were too busy, and I didn't want to make things uncomfortable. You've always liked your independence, and I thought maybe you preferred it that way. Family isn't perfect. I'm not perfect. But we've always loved you, in our own way. Love, Mom. I folded it slowly. The apology wasn't really an apology. It was a reshaping of reality, the way she always did. I'm sorry you feel like, not, I'm sorry we did. And yet, I didn't feel the same ache I used to. The guilt, the confusion, the need to defend myself, I just felt done. Later that night, I took out an old photo album, the kind Mom used to keep in the cabinet next to the TV. I'd taken it with me years ago, thinking maybe one day I'd piece things back together. I flipped through the pages slowly. Baby pictures, school portraits, birthdays, vacations, and in all of them, there I was, smiling, holding Kyle's hand, sitting next to Mom, always present. Funny how someone can call you distant while holding an entire archive of your devotion. I stared at one photo in particular, my 8th grade graduation. I was standing between my parents, wearing a too big navy dress. My eyes looked hopeful. Hopeful in the way only a child can be when they still believe love is something you can earn by doing everything right. I closed the album. No one ever told me that healing doesn't always come with a reunion. Sometimes it comes when you realize you don't need one. The next day, I got a text from Rebecca again. Short this time. Kyle's upset, says you're being selfish. Mom's not doing well. I read it once, then again. Not because it hurt, but because I wanted to be sure I wasn't imagining the audacity. Selfish. That word used to haunt me. The idea that putting myself first, even once, made me cold, ungrateful, broken. But now I saw it for what it was. A label slapped on anyone who finally sets a boundary. I didn't reply. I went for a walk instead. Through the park near my place, where the trees had just started turning gold for fall. The air was crisp, and children were laughing somewhere in the distance. I breathed it in like a person who had spent years holding her breath. Halfway through, I passed an older couple sitting on a bench. They were holding hands, no phones, no distractions, just two people sitting still, like the world didn't need anything else from them. I stopped for a moment and just watched, and I wondered, had my parents ever sat that still with me? Had they ever looked at me without expectation? Had anyone? That night, I sat down with my journal again. Wrote one line. They called me selfish the moment I stopped giving them things they never earned. Then I wrote another. But I'm not selfish. I'm sovereign. I let the pen rest in my hand, staring at the word, sovereign. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It just meant I belonged to myself now. It meant no one else got to rewrite my story again. Not even the people who wrote the first chapters. The following morning, I received an email from someone I hadn't thought about in years. My old boss, Karen. We hadn't spoken since I left the firm 6 years ago. Back then, she told me I was burning out and needed a change. I thought she was just being polite. But maybe she saw something I didn't yet know how to admit. Her message was short. Rachel, I saw your name mentioned in a local piece about rising independent consultants in the city. Congratulations. You've come a long way. If you ever want to talk or grab lunch, my door's open. I read it twice, and I smiled. It wasn't praise I needed. Not anymore. But it felt good to be seen without strings attached, to be recognized for something I had built, not something I'd sacrificed for someone else. I responded with a simple, thank you. We set a lunch for the following week. Then I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked to the mirror. There I was, same face, same quiet eyes, but something had shifted. I looked lighter. Not because anything around me had changed, but because I had finally stopped carrying the things that weren't mine. I didn't have to fix my family. I didn't have to explain myself to people who twisted the truth to suit their guilt. And I didn't have to keep proving that I was good just to be treated like I mattered. I was tired of being good. I wanted to be whole. That afternoon, I went for another drive. Not to escape, but to breathe. The road always gave me space to think, to feel, to exist without being questioned. I ended up by the lake. It was nearly empty, just a few joggers and a couple walking their dog. I parked the car and sat on a bench overlooking the water, the Lamborghini behind me. Silent, out of place in its luxury, and yet, somehow fitting. It wasn't about the car. It never was. It was about having something that told the world, I made it here, even if you never thought I would. I closed my eyes, and let the wind brush across my face. Then I heard a familiar voice. "Rachel?" I turned, heart skipping. It was Noah. He looked surprised, but happy. "Didn't expect to see you here." I smiled. "It's my thinking spot." He chuckled. "I get it. This place always felt a little outside time." He sat beside me, not asking for permission, just understanding the silence. After a few minutes, he asked quietly, "You okay?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Getting there." We talked for over an hour. Nothing heavy, just life, books, music, his dog's ridiculous fear of squirrels. And somewhere in the middle of it, I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. And when the sun began to set, casting everything in that soft, forgiving light, he looked at me and said, "I'm glad you didn't disappear. People like you, they have a way of fading when they're too strong for too long." I didn't reply. I just sat with it, because he was right. When you've been the strong one your whole life, people stop checking if you're still breathing beneath all that weight. They just assume you'll keep standing. But I didn't want to stand out of duty anymore. I wanted to stand because I chose to. As the sky turned to a burnished orange, I told him goodbye, promising we'd meet again soon. And this time, I meant it. Driving home, I rolled the windows down. The wind tangled my hair, and I let it. Let everything feel messy, undone, human. No more letters, no more guilt, no more pretending I didn't hurt when I did. I had walked through the fire, and I was still here. That night, sleep came easily. No racing thoughts, no imaginary arguments in my head, no silent wish that someone might call just to say, "I see you." Instead, I dreamed of nothing, a soft, empty quiet, the kind you get when something inside you finally settles. The next morning, I woke up early again, made coffee, sat on the balcony like I always did now. The city was still waking up. Somewhere below, a dog barked. A delivery truck rumbled past. It was nothing special, and yet everything about it felt peaceful. When you grow up in a family like mine, peace always felt like something you had to earn. If things were calm, it was only because you'd kept your mouth shut, smoothed the tension, smiled through the sting. But this peace, this one was mine. I opened my laptop, ready to dive into a client report, but something made me pause. A strange feeling, like I needed to see something, or maybe face something. I clicked open an old file I hadn't touched in years, a spreadsheet titled Family Loans. I'd started it in my late 20s, just to keep track. $500 for Kyle's car repairs, $1,200 for Mom's dental bill, another $3,000 when Dad's heating unit failed in the middle of winter. There were notes beside each. Said he'd pay next month. Promised to return in 2 weeks. Still waiting. The total sat at the bottom, highlighted in soft gray. $36,280. I stared at that number, not because of what it cost, but because of what it symbolized. Every dollar was a piece of me I'd handed over without resistance. And not once, had any of them even acknowledged it. It was never about the money. It was about how easy it was for them to take, and how hard it was for them to give anything back. I closed the file without saving it. That version of me, the one who kept score because no one else would, she didn't need to keep the receipts anymore. Not for them. That afternoon, I drove back to the neighborhood I grew up in, not to visit, just to look. The street looked the same. Cracked sidewalks, overgrown hedges, the faint sound of a lawnmower in the distance. And then, there it was, the house, pale blue siding, white trim, slightly faded now. The home I helped pay for, the home I was erased from. I parked across the street, just sat there, engine off, windows up. A part of me thought maybe someone would come outside, see me, wave, maybe even walk up to the car. But no one did. After a while, I stepped out, walked up the sidewalk, slow and quiet. The front porch creaked the same way it used to when I was a teenager sneaking in late after curfew. I stood there for a moment, not to knock, just to remember. The door was closed, curtains drawn, a wreath on the door that looked like Melissa's style, all faux flowers and pretense. I took a breath, then another, and I whispered, not to anyone, but just to the air, "You don't own me anymore." Then I turned around and walked back to my car. As I reached the curb, I noticed a child, maybe 6 or 7, riding a scooter down the sidewalk. He passed me, then circled back. "Is that your car?" he asked, pointing to the Lamborghini. I smiled. "It is." His eyes widened. "Wow, you must be really rich." I laughed softly. "I'm really free." He tilted his head, confused, but nodded anyway and scooted off. Back in the car, I sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, feeling the leather warm from the sun. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't, because I wasn't grieving anymore. I was releasing. That house could keep its silence. Those people could keep their comfort in pretending I was the one who walked away for no reason. Let them. I knew the truth, and the truth was enough. 2 days later, the voicemail came. Not from Kyle, not from Rebecca, not from Melissa. It was Mom. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. Not fragile, just tired, in a way that didn't feel theatrical for once. "Rachel," she said, pausing like the name had weight. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I understand. I haven't always been fair to you. I thought I was doing what made things easier. But maybe I was just avoiding what I didn't want to admit. I never asked what you needed. I'm sorry for that." There was another pause, a long one. Then, "I miss you." Click. That was it. No requests, no strings, no mention of money or parties or Kyle. Just 3 words. "I miss you." And suddenly, it was harder to breathe. Not because I forgave her, not because the pain had vanished, but because I had waited my whole life for her to say something, anything, that sounded real. And there it was, small, late, imperfect, but real. I didn't call her back, not that day. Instead, I went for another walk, this time without a destination. I let the sidewalk guide me, weaving through streets I hadn't walked in years. I passed the bakery, where Dad used to take me on Saturday mornings when I was little. The smell of bread pulled something soft from a faraway corner of me. I stopped in, bought a single croissant, sat by the window, and I cried. Quiet, slow tears. Not the kind you hide. The kind that simply arrive when something inside you finally unclenches. No one noticed, or if they did, they were kind enough not to stare. When I got home that evening, I sat on the floor of my living room. Lights off, no music, just the hum of the fridge in the kitchen and the fading orange glow of dusk slipping through the blinds. And I asked myself, do I want her back in my life? Not, does she deserve it? Not, will she hurt me again? Just, do I want it? I didn't answer right away, because I wasn't sure yet. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a door you open once. It's a room you choose to enter when you're ready, knowing full well what still lingers inside. But I was ready to let go of something, the need for it to ever make sense, the need for them to understand what they did, the need to explain myself to people who only ever heard what suited them. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to send, just for me. I wrote everything I'd never said, everything I'd shouted into pillows or rehearsed in my mind during sleepless nights. The betrayal, the shame, the years of being invisible until they needed something. But also, the memories. Mom braiding my hair before the first day of school. Dad lifting me onto his shoulders to see the fireworks at the lake. Kyle letting me steal fries off his plate when we were kids, even though he pretended to hate it. I wrote until the words stopped, until my chest felt hollow but clean, like a closet emptied after years of ignoring the clutter. And then I folded the letter, lit a candle, and burned it, watched the paper curl and darken and disappear. Ashes floated up into the air, then down onto the plate I'd placed beneath. I didn't save them. I just opened the window and let the breeze take them. The next morning, I didn't feel transformed. There was no sweeping sense of renewal, no dramatic shift, like you see in movies, where the main character suddenly smiles at the sky and everything changes. No, I still had dishes in the sink. My inbox was still full. The ache in my chest still lingered, like a bruise, not fully healed. But something had changed. There was space, now, inside me, where resentment used to live. And in that space, I started to wonder what it might feel like to build something new. Not from pain, not as a response to being pushed aside, but simply because I wanted to. So I did something small. I went to the dealership and scheduled a routine service for the Lamborghini. The receptionist asked if I wanted to wait in the lounge or come back later. I told her I'd wait. I sat in the corner of the waiting room with a book and a cup of bitter dealership coffee. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I needed to prove anything to anyone there. I was just a woman, reading a novel, sipping coffee, not someone who'd been excluded, not someone who had made a statement, not someone to be gawked at, just Rachel. Half an hour later, a man sat in the seat across from me. Middle-aged, kind face, business casual. He nodded politely, then after a moment said, "That your Lambo?" I smiled. "Yeah." He whistled under his breath. "Not often you see one of those in this part of town. Not often you see one driven by a woman who wears sneakers and shops at secondhand bookstores either," I said, still smiling. He laughed. "That's refreshing. Most of the guys I know who own something like that won't shut up about it." I shrugged. "It's just a car." He paused. "But not just a car for you, I'm guessing." I looked at him for a long moment, then closed my book. "No," I said. "Not just a car." He didn't press, just nodded and returned to his phone. But in that moment, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Pride. Not flashy, not boastful. Just quiet, steady pride. Because I knew what that car cost. Not the dollar amount. The hours, the silence, the decisions no one clapped for. The years I spent learning how to stand up alone. It didn't come from inheritance, or luck, or connections. It came from saying no, from walking away, from building a life when everyone thought I was just drifting. That night, I got dinner with Noah. He picked a little Italian place, tucked behind a bookstore, the kind of spot that doesn't advertise because it doesn't need to. I liked that. Over pasta and a glass of wine, we talked about everything and nothing. Work, travel, the quiet weirdness of middle age. The way we both felt more invisible now, but also freer. At one point, he asked, "Do you still talk to your family?" I looked down at my glass, swirling the wine once before answering. "No, not really. Not in the way that matters." He nodded slowly. Didn't offer pity, didn't prod. "Sometimes," he said, "people confuse being family with being entitled to your peace." That sentence landed like a soft blow to the chest. "Yeah," I said. "That's exactly it." When we walked back to the parking lot, the breeze had picked up. He offered me his jacket. I said no, but I smiled. At my car, he looked at me and said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you ever feel lonely?" I thought about it. I thought about how many nights I used to cry quietly in the bathroom, so no one would hear, about how I would scroll through old texts, trying to find evidence that maybe I wasn't being pushed aside, about how I'd sit through holiday dinners like a ghost in the room. And now I had quiet mornings, thoughtful conversations, solitude without shame. I used to, I said, but not anymore. Being alone and being lonely aren't the same. He looked at me like he understood, and then he said, "Good. You don't deserve lonely." I nodded, unlocked my car, and slid into the driver's seat. He waved once before walking to his own car. As I started the engine, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Same eyes, same face, but a different woman behind the wheel. It's been 3 months since the party. 3 months since the texts stopped. Since the voicemails slowed. Since I realized that silence could be a gift. Not a punishment. I haven't spoken to Kyle, or Rebecca, or Melissa. Mom sent one more letter after that voicemail. I didn't open it. I didn't tear it up either. I just placed it in the same drawer with the others. Not because I'm holding on to hope, because I'm learning to let things exist without needing to fix them. Some days, I still feel the tug, the old habits, that urge to explain myself, to reach out, to make it right, even when I know it was never mine to carry. But most days, I feel calm. My mornings are slower now. I still wake early, still drink my coffee on the balcony. But now I read, write, let the quiet stretch. I've taken on fewer clients. I earn enough, more than enough, really. But I don't measure myself by income anymore. Not since I realized I was never trying to be rich. Just safe. Just seen. I joined a local art class. Me. Someone who once thought productivity was the only way to earn affection. I bought a sketchbook and drew clumsy flowers in abstract shapes that looked like storms. The instructor says, I have an eye for emotion. I don't know what that means, but I like hearing it. Noah and I meet once a week. No expectations, just warmth, friendship, laughter. Sometimes more, sometimes not, but always kind. He never asks for more than I offer, and that might be the rarest gift of all. Last weekend I drove the Lamborghini out of the city, took the coast road, let the wind braid itself through my hair. There was no destination, just motion, just the rhythm of tires on pavement and a sky so wide it made me feel small in the most comforting way. I stopped by a cliffside overlook, got out, stood at the edge of the world, and just breathed. I didn't think about the party, or the invitations, or the absence of them. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who thought if she worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, gave enough, they'd finally choose her. And I whispered to her, out loud, with the ocean roaring in the background, they didn't choose you, but you can choose yourself now. She deserved to hear that. So did I, and I think, in that moment, we both believed it. Later that night, I passed by a family having dinner through the window of a small house. They were laughing, talking over each other, leaning in like they couldn't get enough of one another. I didn't feel envy. I felt something deeper. Gratitude, not for the pain, but for the clarity it gave me. Because now I know. Love that demands silence isn't love. Family that only remembers you when you're useful isn't family. And strength doesn't come from never breaking. It comes from building again after you do. I wasn't invited to the party, but I showed up anyway. Not for them. For me. In my own time. In my own way. Driving a car they never thought I could afford. Carrying peace they never thought I could earn. Wearing a smile they never thought I could still possess. And when I left that party, with the music still echoing behind me, I didn't feel revenge. I felt release. Because sometimes the best way to answer being excluded is to build a life so full, so grounded, so quietly radiant, that their absence feels like nothing more than background noise. I don't need a seat at their table anymore. I have my own now, and every single chair at it is by invitation only.